them strong and make them healthy and help them make good choices so that they can make choices to protect their children. But again, they may say, no, look, I'm sticking with my guy. I turned out really well. I don't want to leave my husband. I think my kid's lying. I don't believe this. They see daughter perhaps even as a relief. I don't want to have sex with him anymore. If he wants to have sex with her, so be it, but I'm done with this guy. I just need to stick around because of financial reasons or because of, other children that they're raising. But people stay in bad marriages all the time. We have a new case. I don't know who's it been assigned to, but it was very, very sad, in which there were 3 children. The youngest boy had a heart condition that required surgery. Mom thought about leaving her husband when she found out he was sexually abusing the 5-year-old little girl, but when she inquired, she was told she couldn't live in a shelter with her baby who had had the open heart surgery. He was about a year old. So she opted to stay with this gentleman, but it required lots of time in the hospital. Her daughter kept telling her, Mom admitted to us, maybe 50 times the little girl told about things that he was doing to her. She didn't do anything except they lived in a shared housing arrangement. They lived in the basement floor. She told the little 5-year-old to call upstairs to the lady that lived upstairs for help. Yeah, that's a really, really sad one. That gentleman is across the street in Fairfax County Jail. He's claiming he didn't do it, but this little 5-year-old testified in court about what happened in the criminal preliminary hearing, and she did an awesome job because it really happened. We have no doubt. And the mom said, I know it, but I couldn't leave him. Now, whether or not she could have gone to the shelter with that baby, we think she probably could have, or we could have found some housing for her that would have provided her some additional medical, resources for her little one. But man, it's like, ooh, that's one of the very, very tragic situation. All right, but we have to really look at Mom and see, where does she stand? Is she going to protect and support her children, or does she have other things that are more of a priority for her? And that's where CASAs come in, another set of eyes and ears for us. Now we'll talk a little bit about victims. What do we know about them? Many times poor self-esteem. If your first sexual experience is as a 5-year-old and your daddy wants you to sit on his lap and rub your bottom against his privates, and then it progresses to more and more and more explicit sexual activity, that may be how that child learned about sex. We had one little girl who went to a sleepover with her friend. They told the parents goodnight, off the kids go up to bed, and the visiting child said, well, now, does your daddy come up and play the games like my daddy does? And the kid said, no, we already told Mom and Dad goodnight. What's going on? And she said, oh, well, at my house, after I go to bed, my daddy comes up and, we play games, and he reads to me sometimes, but it's really the games I don't like. Luckily, her little friend said, what are you talking about? Got Mom involved. All of a sudden, the kid describes what then we realized was sexual activity. To her, that was a normal way of life. She didn't know any different. All right. We also see kids that have behavioral changes. We talked a little bit about school problems, running away, drinking. We have a teenage runaway shelter alternative house up by Tyson's Corner. A standard question that's asked to all the kids that come in there is, about sexual abuse. And many, many kids are running away from sexual abuse. So we know that. I want to talk a little bit about the phases of sexual assault, because people don't just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to have sex with my kids. It is a progression of activities. And sex offenders truly don't want to hurt kids. And they tell us that. Of the thousands of sex offenders that I have met, they say, I knew that she was 5, so I couldn't have intercourse with her. So we would do other things. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but I don't want to upset anyone with the way I talk about sexual abuse, but I'm very open, very clear. So I apologize if anyone is distressed, but I do get graphic in my discussion because you need to know that these are real things that happen to children. But going on, a kid who says an offender who says, I knew at age 5 I couldn't have intercourse with her, so I did other activities. I put my mouth on parts, I put my fingers in parts, but then I knew when she was 13 that I could probably begin to have other kinds of activities that would lead up to intercourse, because I wouldn't want to hurt her. She's my child. I love my child. So that's part of their, what we call cognitive distortions. They convince themselves that this is okay to do this. And in fact, what they'll do is create opportunities to be alone with kids. We have another active case now that I believe a CASA is assigned to, in which mom was very religious. She'd go to church Wednesdays and Sundays, and she wanted to take the kids with her. The son, no problem. He went along. Well, dad didn't want the daughter going. So many times that only mom and son would go, but daughter would stay home with dad. He encouraged it. She needs me. She needs extra help with her homework on Sundays, and on and on and on and on. He created opportunities for the abuse to happen. Gaining access to children. We talked a little bit about inducements, games, gifts. We had one gentleman who bought a Mustang convertible for his stepdaughter. You think she was going to tell? No way. No way. She didn't tell until she got pregnant. Then we move on to more explicit things. Exposure. Again, this is one of the reasons where the internet is a bad thing. We've had many situations where parents use the internet to educate their children. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't need to look at pornographic things of, actual sexual contact to explain to a kid what sex is all about. But people use the internet for that. Oh, here, let's look at these pictures, these videos. Does that look like fun? You want to try that? Maybe we should do this. These kids are not going to necessarily tell their mom that they're being exposed to these kinds of things. We had one gentleman, and he has now been convicted, so I can talk a little bit about his case, but he was a director of one of our local recreation centers, and he was exchanging pornography on the internet with a gentleman in another state. And when the FBI got involved in that situation, this gentleman from another state said, well, okay, you caught me, but there's this guy in Fairfax County, Virginia, who's sending me stuff, so maybe you should go after him. Well, they did, and what they found was hundreds and hundreds of images of children on his computer that he was sending to various people all over the world. Some of those pictures were of his own stepchildren that he, in fact, had adopted. What we found is this gentleman had a very special interest. He liked little kids. The images were of babies, little teeny babies engaged in sexual activities. That one put me over the edge. I mean, I've been here 28 years and thought I've seen everything, but that one was like, as a result, he was found guilty in Fairfax of abusing the stepson, but he has now pled guilty to the federal charges of the pornography. So he's now going to be serving time in the federal court system as well. But that was really, kind of a shock when you see infants with semen on them and things like that. It was just like, oh, can't believe that one. But again, the internet was how we caught him. So, but then we go on to, really getting the kids involved in the actual activity. But you got to keep the secret, and that's the whole deal of sexual abuse. How do you keep them secret? A lot of the things we've already said. Threatening, bribing, you name it. They think of everything. We had one gentleman, he worked for the government, and what he would do, his wife worked in the evenings, and when he was home with the kids, 4 adopted children, 3 were sibs and 1 was an additional child they adopted, he would give her special privileges. He would say, you can stay up later, I'll buy you those pair of jeans, I'll let you talk on the phone. Mom never lets you talk on the phone to your friends all night long, but I'll let you do that if you do this to me or for me or whatever. But when that child disclosed, he denied it. His wife didn't believe it. She's the bad kid. No way in hell. No, no, no. They basically said, we absolutely don't even want her in our lives any longer. She came into foster care and is still in foster care, and the end result was she doesn't ever see her siblings anymore, her biological siblings. But we know that he did it. I mean, her details were so specific, we have no doubt that he did it, unfortunately. Disclosure means crisis. It means here comes the cavalry. Here comes the police. Here comes CPS, attorneys, judges, CASA. So when a disclosure takes place, we have to figure out what kind of disclosure. Is it purposeful? Is it the child saying, you know what, I don't want to have sex with my brother, my father, my uncle, my babysitter, whoever it is. I don't want to do this anymore. And they're going to tell. They may tell themselves, or they may tell a friend. And if we know kids, hopefully that friend is going to tell somebody, their parent, their teacher, somebody that's going to get some help for that child. Or is it because they've come down with a sexually transmitted disease, or they're pregnant? We have a child who had a pregnancy. She was 12 years old. She was a sixth grader. She was having sex with her biological father, became pregnant. Mom and Dad took her to the doctor and said, something's wrong with this kid. And the doctor's office did a test. They called us and said, this child's pregnant. They had her alone in the exam room. Mom and Dad were in the lobby. And the little girl tells the nurse at the doctor's office that, yeah, she's been having sex. And she begins to cry. The nurse was astute enough to say, is it somebody in your family? And all she could do was shake her head. At that point, we said, don't talk to the kid, don't interview her, don't put words in her mouth, don't ask her, was it your father, your brother, your uncle, don't do that. She's pregnant, she says it's somebody in her family, let us do the questioning. Because very quickly that case could have been down the tubes if it had been gone the wrong way. So pregnancy, unfortunately, is a real telltale sign. It could be an accidental disclosure in which somebody also observes it. I had one mom who was cutting the grass. As she's going down the side of her house, she looks in the window and she saw her husband having sex with her daughter. And he thought, the wife's out cutting the grass. We got 45 minutes, no problem. Mom caught him. I thought she was going to kill him, but she didn't. Okay, secrets. That's the whole deal about sexual abuse. Secrets, secrets, secrets. And when we get involved, it blows that family, as I say, into a crisis. And you know what? A lot of the things that we're told to that child could happen, do happen. People may be arrested. People may go to jail. People may lose their job. Mom might be really the only person that is raising the children. She might be the single parent, single wage earner. People may be mad at that child for telling. It could be other family members. It could be their siblings. If you'd have kept your mouth shut, Dad would be here. We wouldn't be having all these troubles. Mom wouldn't be crying. Mom wouldn't be figuring out where we're going to live because now we have to move because you told. And siblings can be vicious on children. So it's a really tough situation. What do you think would happen to a child who tells and then everything comes back on her? What might be a natural response for that child? We can't. Absolutely. It didn't happen. I made it all up. Never mind. I want it to all go away. One of the most kind of profound pieces of research was done by Roland Summit, and he wrote something called the Sexual Abuse Accommodation Syndrome, and I'd be happy to provide you guys with copies of it. But basically he says be prepared because victims have problems. And it's once we intervene that can create even additional problems for victims. They want to take it back. They want to just say, forget it. It's not worth it. And what if you have a mom that doesn't believe, support, and protect? What are the options for that child? Can we leave that child with a mom who says, say it didn't happen, take it back, look what you've done? Or a mom that gets all the family members to almost beat up on the kid. We had one recently, they brought the priest in. Whew, now we're talking heavy hitters. Look what you've done to this family. Take it back. Say it was somebody else. It's really, really hard for victims. And that's where we have to be aware of the things that potentially are going to happen to them so we can offer them support. And we can help mom figure out how can she navigate in the world without that person. We can't support her financially for the rest of her life, but can we help her in a way that might make her understand that there is life after that sex offender in their family. But it really creates many more problems, particularly if mom doesn't have support. Let's say mom has kids, she then divorces, marries another person. Her family was not in favor of it, and they say, oh, why are you marrying that guy? He's a bum, you shouldn't be with him. So then sexual abuse comes out. Is she going to call up her family and say, you know that guy that you weren't really crazy about? Well, guess what? He just got arrested. And what's her family going to say? I told you so. You should never have been with him in the first place. As opposed to, oh my gosh, what can I do to help you? We hope that she has family supports, but many times they don't. So then she's on her own. But then here comes the cavalry. Here comes law enforcement and Child Protective Services. Our goals are different. Our goals, Child Protective Services, protect children. We look at safety. We look at risk. How can we maintain this child in their own home environment, if possible? Keep them at home, keep them in school, keep them with their community, their support systems, if at all possible. But we have to have a non-offending parent who believes, supports, and protects. And you're going to hear me preach that 100 million times. But if we don't have that, then is that child really safe? Physically safe, emotionally safe? We have to weigh all those. The police goal is what? What's the goal of a police investigation? Was a crime committed? Lock them up. You know, are they a danger to society? Lock them up. The process is a joint investigation. Many years ago, Virginia was one of the forefronts of doing joint investigations. Almost every jurisdiction within the state has an excellent working relationship with law enforcement, whether it's the county police, as in larger jurisdictions, or the sheriff's department for the other jurisdictions. But CPS and police are required to work together because we're dealing with the same people. Victims, offenders, non-offending caretakers. Even though our goals are different, it's the same knowledge, the same body of evidence. Two different court processes can go on. But by doing a joint investigation, we cut down on the number of interviews of children. We work very closely to make sure that all the services are put in place to make sure it's a good investigation, whether that means a medical examination, any other forensic evidence that can be obtained to strengthen the police criminal case and our civil case. So we work very closely together. The outcomes certainly are different. If there's a criminal element, it certainly can be an arrest, criminal charges placed, with the outcome potentially be incarceration, or it could be a period of probation, treatment, lots of things ordered for the offender. But the criminal case only can deal with the offender. As you know, civil abuse and neglect petitions that we file pull in folks like CASAs, guardian ad litems, the whole helping system gets more involved. And the civil case touches everyone in the family. Mom, dad, the victim, their siblings, everyone. As a result, I have found that it's much more helpful to pursue both kinds of court action. Because let's say the criminal doesn't fly. It is a higher standard of evidence. And sometimes it's very difficult to convince a judge or a jury that this teenager, who might be, you know, running around, promiscuous, might be messing with drugs, alcohol, that child is really telling the truth. Now, if I showed you what she looked like when she was 5 years old when he started, you might believe that little 5-year-old or the 10-year-old. But now, 10 years later, she's 15. She doesn't look like that little innocent 5-year-old when he started. In fact, she probably has had lots of problems. She probably has been drinking and running and doing kinds of things because you know what? She don't want to be home having sex with dad. So there are times when the criminal is not successful. And the abuse neglect then provides us with the ability to put in some protective measures, get evaluations of folks, figure out what kinds of therapeutic things are needed, and also put conditions on that offender for having contact with all of the kids in the family. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. What happens when we get called? There's a state hotline. Many jurisdictions have a local hotline. We hook up with the police. We go out and interview people. A lot of the things we've been talking about. They want to send the kid away. Mom doesn't believe. You know, you never liked your stepfather, and here I'm trying to encourage you to spend more time with him and do things, and now you're making up these lies. You know, I go to choir practice every Tuesday night, and what do? You're claiming that he's doing this stuff to you. I don't believe it. You know, he wouldn't do that. I know him. He's my husband. Well, guess what? That's one of the hardest things about moms, is trying to help them sort out, because what's that say about them? I've married a guy that sexually abused my kid, but I thought I knew him. You know, I've been married to him for years. What's it say about me as a woman, me as a mom? Why wouldn't my kids tell me? And in fact, that's one of the first things that always comes out of a mom's mouth. I don't believe it because my child didn't tell me. Most kids don't. And we have to help moms understand why they don't. Because of all the things we talked about, why kids don't tell. We had one situation, it was not an incestuous family, but it was a gentleman who lived in an apartment complex where there were lots of teenage boys. He was a true pedophile. His sexual orientation was to have sex with teenagers. And he would stock his fridge with beer. He would give them cigarettes. He'd do all kinds of things. He'd have video games, you name it. So on a Saturday afternoon, if these kids would go hanging out at his house, have a couple of beers and cigarettes, do you think they're going to go home and say, hey, Mom, you know, Mr. Smith that lives, 3 buildings down the apartment, he gave us a couple of beers, some smokes, and blowjob. Okay, it was great. They're not going to say that. They are not going to tell. Offenders are excellent manipulators. They're going to pick a victim who's not going to tell. They're going to work on that relationship and make sure that they don't tell. And in fact, we talked about recanting. And then we have the mom who says, I was a victim. Same kind of stuff. There are different kinds of offenders, and there's different words for offenders. What you don't see up here is homosexuals. Somebody who has a sexual orientation to have sex with children of their same sex, they're a child molester. Depending on the age, they may be a pedophile if they like little ones. They might be a hebephile if they like older kids, but they're not homosexual. Homosexuals want to have sex with people their own age, right? So a lot of times people say, well, he was a child molester, but he also was a homosexual. No, doesn't work. Doesn't work that way. So we have lots of names for offenders, but there's 2 particular types of offenders we want to talk about. There are those that really like grown-up women. That was their orientation. They grew up in a situation where they liked girls, they liked women, that was their orientation. But as they got older, things changed within their world, within their life. It might have been some stressful event. It could have been some impulsive thing of, gosh, I saw this on the internet, my kid walked in, she asked me what that picture was, and the next thing you know, I just got into an explanation and started showing her pornography, and then I got an erection, and and it just went on from there. Or was it, I'm having such a problem with my wife, she doesn't show me love and affection and attention, that, I just started spending more time with my child. And as time went on, just hugging and cuddling and doing things, and I didn't mean to sexually abuse her, but then it just went too far. Within these folks, we also have the preferential child molesters. These are the guys that say, I want to have sex with kids. Many of them are men who want to have male victims. And of the pedophile cases we have worked, they have had hundreds and hundreds of victims. And that's real scary when you think how many victims that these people have had. Many of them have been sexually abused, and their target of preference is a child at the age that they were when they were sexually abused. All right. Many of them have no involvement with drug or alcohol. I mean, they are so obsessed with having relationships with kids, they look squeaky clean. Because after practice, hey, Mom and Dad, why don't you go out for dinner? The kids are all coming over to my house, we'll get pizza and have a good time. Well, guess what? It might only be one child. It's not all the kids on the team. It might be that one child. But they are just obsessed with kids. You probably won't have as much involvement with these kind of characters as a CASA because most of your cases are within a family. But these kind of folks may be involved with many, many children in the community. It could be they're involved with their own kids who help bring other children to them. We had one gentleman who married a woman with 3 little girls, and his preference was little girls.